Anthony Edwards drops 41 points as the Wolves win their fourth straight and 7th out of 8 games, beating the Memphis Grizzlies. Three big things from this one. Anthony Edwards, a big third quarter, and the return of Kyle Anderson next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day. It's the post-game pod from the Wolves win over the Grizzlies. My name is Ben Beecken. I am the host of Locked On Wolves, and a lot to get into today. We've obviously got to start with Anthony Edwards' incredible performance. This is not low key, like pretty obviously one of Ant's better games in terms of some of the crazy stuff he did his first quarter, his fourth quarter, and how important it was based on some of the other stuff that was happening. So we'll talk about all that, talk about the big third quarter run. And yes, the return of slow-mo. Kyle Anderson played minutes for the Timberwolves for the first time in, I guess, nearly 2 years. And interesting rotation notes. So we'll talk about those three big things off the top, plus a few other notes, some individual studs and duds toward the end. It's all coming on the show today. First, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right, so the Wolves come into this thing coming obviously off of the big win on Sunday in Denver, the national TV matinee, having won coming into this game 6 out of their last 7 games. Of course, this Memphis team looks nothing like the team that beat Minnesota a month ago. No Jaren Jackson Jr., among others. A couple guys that they got from Utah playing significant minutes. Ty Jerome, I guess, played against the Wolves a month ago, but he's back and playing. Scottie Pippen Jr. playing. It's a lot of young, hungry type guys for the most part. And so they're playing hard. They'd won 2 straight coming in, but it's like a C team, essentially, is what you're getting from the Grizzlies. And coming off the big win on Sunday, Minnesota was, I think, 13.5 point favorites on FanDuel before this game. And I was a little nervous about it. I talked about it on yesterday's show. And sure enough, the Timberwolves came out somewhat predictably flat. The defense actually wasn't too bad early. Memphis made a lot of tough shots. And we got to credit the Grizzlies. They scored 32 points in the first quarter. And actually, again, I thought the Wolves defense was okay. The offense, however, was atrocious. Anthony Edwards, thankfully, could not miss early in this game. He also couldn't pass the ball. And that's actually where I want to start. And I want to start with, that sounded confusing. I don't want to start with Ant not passing the ball, but I want to address that. We're going to talk 3 big things. Ant was phenomenal. And that's where I want to start in this game. He was, by and large, the reason the Timberwolves won, as opposed to the other night where the Wolves won. And what was it? That was a Sunday game against Denver. There were 7 of the 9 guys that played or whatever scored in double figures. And it was a really balanced scoring attack. Ant had 41. Julius Randle finished with 23, although he was really bad in the first half. 2 other guys had between 14 and 16. You had 5 guys that played and scored single-digit points in this game for Minnesota. 5 of 9 players scored in single digits, and they all played at least 12 minutes. So it's not like these are guys that barely played. So it was all about Anthony Edwards. And early in the game, he gave and he took away. There were at least 2 or 3 possessions early in the first quarter where the right play would have been to pass the ball. His first bucket, I think or maybe his second bucket, was like a turnaround jumper from the free throw line with 3 guys on him in semi-transition. He makes it. The next one, a contested shot. He makes it. It's like, what are you going to do when he makes the shot? But the process wasn't, it was the sort of play where the coach is going, no, 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 yes, right? Early enough in the game, that's not quite true. But like in a film session, you're not going to tell, yeah, that's the right shot to take there. But he's making the shot, right? So who cares? He's Anthony Edwards. And that level of confidence and shot-making abilities actually kind of sort of what carried the Wolves to the win in the fourth quarter of this game. There were a couple of possessions where he took the shot, didn't make it. Maybe he should have gotten a foul call, didn't. Passed the ball late, gave a teammate a hand grenade, that sort of thing. So the Wolves end up down 9 at the end of the first quarter. But still, Ant had, I think, 12 in the first quarter. I think he had 19 points at halftime. And it was just, like the Wolves needed it. But at the same time, the way that Anthony Edwards was playing was also contributing to some of the offensive issues. I mean, Minnesota was stuck under 30 points midway through the second quarter. They were down by 11 points. And Anthony Edwards is the only Timberwolves player that made a three-pointer in the first half of this game. He was one of only three that made one, period, on this night, as crazy as that is. Only three Timberwolves players made a three-pointer in this game. Nobody but Ant made one in the first half. Minnesota did not lead by multiple possessions in this game until midway through the third quarter. It was the first time they were able to build a 4-point lead or greater, which is just crazy. Back to Anthony Edwards. The way Ant closed this game, and by closed, I mean like when he came back into the game in the fourth quarter, so like 9-ish minute mark in the fourth quarter, was just bonkers. He hit a three. I think this is how the sequence went. A three-pointer, comes down, gets a crazy block at the rim on the other end. Comes down, hits another step-back three. Then he hits a tough kind of, I guess, a step back on the baseline for two over two defenders. Then he hits another three. It was a stretch where he scored 10 straight points for Minnesota. I think he had a free throw in there too. He had 10 straight points for the Wolves. The lead balloons from a couple possessions up to, it got all the way up to 17 points. But it was just this dominant stretch where he's doing stuff that nobody else does. I mean, like, my wife, who watches Wolves games with me a lot of the time, but isn't like a huge Wolves fan and doesn't pay super close attention to everything, I was like, you have to see this Ant block. And I rewound it, and she looked up and watched, not in slow motion, just watched. She goes, oh, it looks like he's climbing the air. Like, well, he's jumping. Like, it looks like he's actually climbing. Like, he's not jumping, right? It's that different athlete where somebody who's not as, like, you could just look up and be like, that guy looks different. It was that whole stretch where he looked different. And without that stretch, I mean, hey, look, it still finished dicey for the Wolves. They were only up 6 with like 40 seconds left after being up 17 with like 4 minutes to play, 3.5 minutes to play. It's just crazy the way that lead evaporated. But Anthony Edwards was just the shot making is unbelievable. He also had 5 steals, which was a season high for a game. And 2 or 3 of them were of the like, hey, I'm just going to take the ball now variety, and he had one of these late in the game against Denver, in the fourth quarter against Denver, that was important, where he just kind of like, he's off ball and the ball's coming and he just decides, I'm going to jump and like snatch the ball out of the air. And I don't know if it's opposing offenses are thinking that, you know, that the book's out on Ant sometimes being a relatively lazy off ball defender, and you could just lob a pass to his guy because he can get back cut. He might not be paying attention to his guy very closely. But now, because of Ant's athleticism and his size, and like if he decides he's going to lock in, you can't make that lazy pass on Anthony Edwards. He's just going to snatch it out of the air and start a fast break the other way. Just a phenomenal start to the game for Anthony Edwards. An even better finish on both ends of the floor. 41 points on 29 shots. Better from 50% from 3. He's 50% from 2. He was, 8 of 16 from 2, 7 of 13 from 3. Just nuts. He only had 4 free throw attempts in this game. Made all of them. 6 boards. 5 steals. Only 2 assists to 2 turnovers, but like did everything for the Wolves. It was just an otherworldly finish to this game for Anthony Edwards. And there are not very many guys that can score the basketball like him in the league right now. Like, it's a very short list. We talk about SGA's craftiness, and SGA's obviously a good defender too. And you know, I guess he would like, when you talk about levels to an offensive game, though, like I don't want to get into like obviously SGA and Jokic are the 2 best players in the league. So I'm not saying Ant is better than those guys, but it's him, those 2 guys. And I guess Luka Doncic would be the top 4 in terms of offensive consistency, creativity, the different levels of things they can do and the way that they can ratchet their game up down the stretch. Obviously, you know, Luka hasn't quite been there here of late, and he's the one of the him and Jokic, neither one of them are great defenders. Jokic has been worse this year defensively than normal, and actually so is Luka. Like, he's in that conversation with those 3 guys. It's those 4 that are the best kind of the best overall package when it comes to offensive players. Like, just crazy, the shot making and the effortlessness that he plays with on that end of the floor right now. And obviously the defense was really good in this game too. I have 2 more of my 3 big things that I want to get to. I want to talk about Kyle Anderson's addition to the rotation, and then key in a little bit on that third quarter run that the Wolves had, because a couple of guys who didn't score a ton of points in this game, I guess one of them was their second leading scorer, but a couple of guys who I think were kind of unsung heroes because of how Ant started and closed the game. But it was the third quarter when the Wolves actually, pushed ahead and built a little bit of a lead. So I want to talk about who contributed there. We'll talk about slow-mo in the rotation. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is, well, a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. That's TurboTax.com/local. A reminder that you can get Locked On Wolves ad-free with the Everydayer Club. Plus, you'll get access to the members-only Discord channel. Do a lot of chatting on there on a daily basis. Myself, a handful of others that are loyal listeners to the show. So be sure to join at lockedonwolves.supercast.com. Again, ad-free episodes of Locked On Wolves plus members-only Discord access. lockedonwolves.supercast.com. All right. Let's talk about slow-mo first, and then we'll get into the third. Actually, well, yeah, let's do slow-mo first. So Kyle Anderson checked into the game late in the first quarter. And what I'd been saying on the show, going back to late last week when it was first reported that Kyle Anderson would ultimately be joining the Wolves, was I thought that he was best cast as a backup 5 at playing the non-Gobert minutes. I posited I didn't think he could play with Rudy Gobert. I especially didn't think he could or should play with Julius Randle. Well, he didn't play the 5 at all in this game. In fact, I believe he played as the 3 the entire time. When he first came into the game, it was with Rudy Gobert and Reid. Gobert immediately picked up his second foul late in the first quarter, so he left the game and Randle came in. So it was Randle, Reid, and Kyle Anderson. In fact, of Kyle Anderson's 14 minutes played, I believe all of them were as the small forward. He didn't even play the 4. And if he did, it was very briefly and never played the 5. So not at all what I was expecting. He basically just kind of slotted right into that 9th rotation role that, some combination of Terrence Shannon and Jalen Clark and Rob Dillingham was supposed to take hold of. Now, Bones Highland is the 8th guy right now, and obviously some combination of those guys was supposed to have that role too. Remember, Mike Conley was in the rotation, so really Bones is in the Conley role and Anderson's in the whatever that 9th role was supposed to be. So I thought that was interesting. He ran a lot of offense, which it's not surprising at all. I thought he was fine. He did some stuff defensively that was good. He was quiet. He had 2 points on a couple of free throw attempts, and he had 1 rebound. No other stats other than a couple of personal fouls in 14 minutes. He was very slightly the lowest guy in terms of plus minus, which in this game is a weird one. We'll talk about that here in a little. Actually, yeah, when we get to my third of 3 big things, what some of the plus minus numbers showed in this game. But I thought slow-mo was fine. I think the most interesting thing is who he's going to play with. I don't think it's palatable to play him with Rudy and Randle, with one or the other, much less with both of them at the same time. I think Nas has to be on the floor. You can't have 3 guys that can't shoot threes. Now, I know Kyle Anderson, there's a lot of thought that he can be decent from the corners again, now that some of the eye stuff, division stuff has been corrected. He was good this year in his limited time playing on the floor with Utah and Memphis. But, teams are going to leave Kyle Anderson open. So the spacing thing, obviously he's got to knock him down if he's open, but it doesn't help spacing. It hurts spacing to have slow-mo on the floor. And obviously teams would love if Julius Randle keeps shooting. Dude's under 30% since November. And he was 0 for 4 again in this game. And obviously Gobert doesn't shoot threes other than the other day in Denver. But Gobert's never made a 3 in his career, right? So I don't think you can really play those three guys together. I think it's hard to play two of them together. It was fine in this game. I'm curious to see if this shifts at all, depending on opponent, game situation, matchups, etc. Depending on how Randle's playing, depending on how Nas is playing. This was a pretty quiet Nas Reid game. But something to keep an eye on. And good to see Kyle Anderson back in a Timberwolves uniform. Let's talk about the third quarter. Minnesota was down 9 at the end of the first quarter. They were down 5 at halftime. And the start of the third quarter was actually kind of rough for Minnesota as well. And it took until midway through the third quarter before the Wolves were able to take a lead and then also ultimately take a multi-possession lead for the first time in the game. This was a run that was keyed almost entirely by Donte DiVincenzo and Julius Randle. As much as Ant was the hero, and I opened the show talking Ant, he scored 40 plus. We got to talk Ant. He got the MVP chance at the end. The third quarter, when Minnesota was trailing, they were again down, 5 at halftime, and they were very quickly down 8 in the third quarter. It was a lot of Julius Randle, and it was a lot of Donte DiVincenzo. Donte gets an assist on an Ant bucket. The next Wolves basket was a Randle, I think it was a dunk or a layup. Then Randle hits a shot in the paint as Minnesota pulls to within 2 points. A couple possessions later, it's another Donte assist to Anthony Edwards. Randle gets the free throw line. He makes a pair of free throws. DiVincenzo gets another assist. And there were a couple of DiVincenzo defensive rebounds and hustle plays mixed in there. There was a Memphis timeout that was forced by some DiVincenzo hustle. And it's a lot of non-box score stuff, although I just listed 3 assists from from Donte. I think 3 of his 6 assists were in that early to mid third quarter span. DiVincenzo finished with just 7 points on 7 shots, only 1 made 3, 6 assists and 4 rebounds. Not quite a stat stuffing game, although a pretty well-rounded game for Donte. He was a plus 21 in a game the Wolves only won by 7, and nobody else was better than a plus 13, and only 2 guys were better than a plus 5. Now, Donte wasn't on the floor as the Grizzlies made a big chunk of their run in the final couple of minutes. That was kind of an interesting one. We'll talk about that here in a second. I don't want to get off track here. But DiVincenzo and Randle together, and Randle was atrocious in the first half. Donte didn't shoot the ball well at all this game, but he clearly made a concerted effort to make an impact with his hustle. DiVincenzo did, and he did exactly that. And he and Randle together, the 2 ex-Knicks, were the biggest reasons, I believe, for Minnesota flipping the script from what was a 5-point deficit at halftime, and they ended up 7 going to the fourth quarter. Those guys, and it was DiVincenzo's hustle on both ends, on the glass, especially on the defensive end of the floor overall. And then also Randle playing a little bit of bully ball when he looked just kind of disinterested and only interested in shooting threes in the first half, of which he made none. Randle was very good in the third quarter of this game. Donte and Randle were the 2 that keyed the run. Quickly at the end of the game, and this is what really impacted some plus minuses, is Minnesota was up by 17 points late in the fourth quarter. And Chris Finch took Donte DiVincenzo out in favor of Dosunmu, thinking being Dosunmu's I would say marginally is probably not a strong enough word. He's a better ball handler, not significantly better, but a better ball handler than Donte DiVincenzo. And so clearly Chris Finch's thought with this, what was this? It was a 15-point game with 5:30 left, and then a 17-point game with 3:41 after Ant hits his crazy 3-point step back. The Grizzlies call timeout. DiVincenzo had 1 turnover. Ant had the dumb transition take foul, and then Dosunmu comes in with this a 16-point game, mostly for ball handling capabilities. And this isn't Dosunmu's fault, but then the Grizzlies go on a run. They get it all the way down to as close as 6 points in the final minute. It was 8 points to the minute 30, and then 6 points with 1:05 left. So the Grizzlies went from a 17-point game to a 6-point game in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And that all happened after Dosunmu came in the game for DiVincenzo. Not because of that. I want to be very careful, but that's what influenced those plus minuses even more in this game. That said, going back to the DiVincenzo point of my 3 big things, Donte was very good in this game, even though he only scored 7 points. And he did a lot more of those kind of extra little things in this game then I feel like he's done a lot more of them this year than he did last year. And part of that is playing with the starting lineup. I think he probably feels less pressure to try and score than he did last season when it was him and Nas off the bench, and like obviously Nikhil as well. But there was this element of like, should he be scoring like a 6-man? And that was kind of, what we expected from DiVincenzo, probably what he expected from himself. And I know he is scoring more this year. That's mostly due to increased minutes because he's a starter. But I think the quote unquote little things he's doing have increased because he's playing with better players, straight up. And he's already, he's only a couple games shy of the number of games he started with the Knicks a couple of years ago, scoring average second most of his career. But the little things he's doing are not so little things, even if they don't show up in the stat sheet. I thought he was huge in the third quarter. Let's talk individual studs and duds. We'll do that here next and peek ahead at the rest of the week. That's how we will close out the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Gametime. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. And that's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs. And that's with the fans. All you got to do is pull up the Gametime app, pick an upcoming NBA game. The Wolves are home for 2 more on the current homestand. You'll get your tickets locked in within minutes. You'll see the all-in price up front, and there won't be any surprise fees at the checkout. Being able to see your view from your seat is possibly the best thing before it makes the decision to buy and which seats to buy really easy. Zone deals also stand out quite a bit. Choose your section. Gametime will pick your seats, and you will save. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. The Wolves take on the Raptors this Thursday, and then a Saturday matinee against Orlando. You can get all that on Gametime. Again, code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, that's .co, not .com. All right, talking individual studs and duds. Obviously, we got to start with Anthony Edwards. 41 points on 15 to 29. He was exactly 50% from 2-point range. 8 of 16. Missed a couple, I don't want to call them gimmies, but missed a couple easy ones at the rim. Shot the ball well from the mid-range. 7 of 13, so above 50% from outside the arc. 4 of 4 at the line. 6 boards, 2 assists, 5 steals in this game. Just 2 turnovers for Andy. He also had that crazy block. So we could also call it 6 stocks in this game, which is also a crazy number. It was a plus 13. We talked a lot about Ant in the opening segment, but he was phenomenal in this game. This is a classic case of him willing them to win. And if he had shared the ball a little more early, could that have been better for the Wolves overall? Maybe, but he wasn't the reason they got down in the first place. And he was the reason that they were able to extend the lead to 17 in the fourth quarter and give themselves the cushion that, of course, they gave a lot of back in the final 4 minutes of the game, but still a fantastic Anthony Edwards performance. Number 2 for stud. This is actually a little bit tricky to kind of parse these in this game. I got to go Julius Randle, and there were some bad turnovers, like some really bad turnovers, but his role in that third quarter stretch that we just talked about was huge. I mean, no one else scored more than 16 points outside of Randle and Ant. And Julius still did shoot 7 of 15. He was 7-11 on twos, bully balled some of these, more, and they weren't diminutive, but much smaller Memphis defenders. Got to the line 12 times, which, by the way, I meant to talk about this earlier. The officiating was bad. There were 34 combined free throws in the first half of this game. And actually, there were 29 combined free throws in the second half of this game. Just way too many free throws. And like the first few minutes, they weren't calling anything. And then suddenly they were calling everything. It was just not great. Randle did have 5 turnovers, and a couple were really ugly in the second half. And the first half, he was much worse even. But the bully ball he was able to pull off in the third quarter, especially the 12 free throw attempts, it was important to the Wolves pulling out this game. And I thought it was a pretty good Randle game. 23, 11, and 4, even with the 5 turnovers. And even with the 4 missed threes, 12 free throw attempts, 7 of 11 on twos. We'll take it. It wasn't a bad Julius Randle game. I got to give him a stud for this one. I'm conflicted on the next one between Dosunmu and Donte DiVincenzo, and I kind of want to just have them split the award for the third stud. They had very different games. Dosunmu pushed the pace offensively and was very good in the open floor. Had some great moments in the second quarter, and then also as part of the run, I think it was third quarter, not fourth quarter, when he was a little bit better. He had 14 points on 9 shots, did not make a three once again. It only attempted one, by the way. He was 5 of 8 on 2s, 0 of 1 on 3s. It was all half court, or I should say all transition stuff, where he was really pushing the pace. He also had 4 assists. I mean, 14, 4, and 3 for Dosunmu, I thought was very good. Donte, we already talked about, and he did a lot of little things as well. So if you want to combine the two, they each played, essentially, Donte played 30 minutes and Io played 29. They combined to shoot 8 of 16 from the field, only 1 of 6 on 3s. Okay, but so what is that? 7 of 11 on 2s, 4 of 4 at the line, a combined 10 assists to only 2 turnovers, and a combined 7 rebounds. So again, 21, 10, and 7 combined with only 2 turnovers. Considering they only combined for 1 made 3, we'll take that. The Wolves will take that from their non-Ant backcourt, right? That's essentially what that is outside of the Bones Highland minutes. It's the non-Ant backcourt. So those are I'm cheating. I'm calling it 4 studs. My only dud in this game is Reid, and he wasn't even really all that bad. He just only had 3 points on 8 shots, missed all of his 3-point attempts. He was pretty good on the glass. 6 boards in 23 minutes is good for Nas. Had a couple of 50-50 balls he contributed to getting. Had a steal and a block. I thought he was okay in this game, but they just need a little more scoring punch out of him off the bench, and he needed to do more like in the first half when the offense was struggling. But I guess if I had to pick a dud, he'd be the guy. Slow-mo, we already talked about. Bones Highland somehow picked up 5 fouls in 12 minutes. I mean, he almost could be a dud just for that. He also had 3 turnovers. So actually, let's split that too. Well, we're at it. Let's go ahead and just name, what did I just name? 6 of the 9 guys that played for the Wolves is either a stud or a dud. We'll split it between Nas and Bones. Bones hit a couple of deep threes early. That also kind of helped keep the Wolves in the game, but 6 points on 6 shots plus 3 turnovers and 5 fouls in 12 minutes. A couple really just kind of silly ones in the backcourt trying to put pressure, which is nice to see. It's really nice to see him competing defensively, but just kind of a rough go for Bones in this one. Just a tough in that regard. But anyway, overall, I mentioned this a second ago, I thought the officiating was bad. I mean, Minnesota only shot 29% on 3s and Memphis shot 39%. Memphis was shooting the lights out. And I did talk about this, by the way, yesterday in the preview, that Memphis has been shooting the 3 really well. And they've got a bunch of guys that play for them now that didn't play for them a month ago that shoot the 3 really well, whether it's Jalen Wells or in his very brief NBA career, Ryan Rupert, Walter Clayton, Cedric Howard. These guys can make 3s. And sure enough, they were really hot shooting early in the game, which built a double-digit lead for the Grizzlies. They shot 39% on 3s. Minnesota attempted 4 less and made 5 less than Memphis, just 29%. Thankfully, they made their enough free throws, and did enough in the open floor running after makes and misses to be able to get to 117 points in this game. But certainly some rocky moments along the way. The start and finish from Ant in the third quarter from DiVincenzo and Randle is really what helped the Wolves to this win. The rest of this week, the Wolves play host to Toronto on Thursday night, and then they play host to Orlando in a Saturday matinee that will be on Prime Video. So they go every other here this week up until, I guess, through Saturday. Then they get Sunday, Monday off. So tomorrow on the show, we'll dig in on some lineup stuff. We'll maybe talk a little more about a potential Kyle Anderson role and what the rotations could look like here moving forward. We'll obviously preview Wolves Raptors as well. But that will be tomorrow's show. And then, of course, Friday we'll be into the postgame pod from Toronto on Thursday night. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Wolves ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to join the club. If you're watching on video, we'll send you to the first ever 24/7 National NBA YouTube channel right after this episode. On audio, make sure that you make your second listen NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA. Of course, Locked On Wolves is part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.